Desperate plight of Rohingya refugees stranded off Indonesia's coast, a humanitarian crisis unfolds. About 140 weak and hungry Rohingya refugees, primarily women and children, remain stranded on a wooden boat anchored just off the coast of Indonesia's Aceh province. The boat, having departed from Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, 2 weeks ago, was intended for Malaysia. However, the passengers now find themselves rejected by local communities in Indonesia, despite desperate conditions and 3 reported deaths on the journey. Local residents, citing past unrest caused by other refugee arrivals, have refused to allow the refugees to disembark. The Rohingya, who are part of a Muslim minority persecuted in Myanmar, have long faced violence and discrimination. After fleeing genocide in 2017, many sought refuge in Bangladesh, but conditions there have led to perilous sea journeys like this one. The stranded boat has been floating near the coast since Friday, with local authorities providing only limited assistance. 11 of the passengers were hospitalized due to worsening health conditions, but despite appeals from international organizations, including the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, local fishing communities insist on keeping the refugees offshore. Signs posted at the local seaport reflect the tense atmosphere, declaring opposition to the refugees landing. While the refugees are receiving food aid from locals and the UNHCR, the dire situation underscores the broader refugee crisis faced by the Rohingya, many of whom have risked their lives in search of safety. The precariousness of the situation became evident when Aceh police arrested 3 individuals on charges of human smuggling, further complicating the humanitarian response. Indonesia, despite not being a signatory to the UN's 1951 Refugee Convention, has a history of offering temporary refuge to displaced individuals, yet the Rohingya remain on the fringes, both figuratively and literally, as they fight for survival. The Indonesian government has rescued Rohingya refugees in the past, but incidents like the capsizing of another boat in March, where 67 perished, highlight the lethal dangers these refugees face. This unfolding crisis begs the question of how much longer nations in Southeast Asia can turn a blind eye to one of the world's most persecuted minorities. Susan Smith faces parole 30 years after drowning her sons, the tragic story revisited. Nearly 30 years after one of the most notorious child murders in U.S. history, Susan Smith, now 53, is set to appear before the South Carolina Parole Board on November 20th. Smith has been serving a life sentence since her 1995 conviction for the drowning deaths of her 2 sons, 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alex, whom she strapped into their car seats before rolling the vehicle into a lake. The case captivated the nation in 1994, when Smith falsely claimed that a black man had carjacked her vehicle with her children inside. For 9 excruciating days, Smith tearfully pleaded for their return. The truth was revealed when investigators discovered inconsistencies in her story and found the car submerged in John D. Long Lake with the boys inside. Prosecutors argued that Smith killed her children because she was having an affair with a wealthy man who did not want children. Though she faced the death penalty, a jury ultimately sentenced her to life in prison. Over the years, Smith's time behind bars has been marked by scandals, including relationships with prison guards, and controversy surrounding her alleged lack of remorse. Tommy Pope, the lead prosecutor in her case, remains firm in his belief that Smith should serve her full sentence. He pointed to her behavior in prison as evidence of her ongoing self-centeredness, saying, "She's proven she's only thinking about Susan Smith." Smith's ex-husband, David Smith, who has struggled to move on from the loss of his sons, plans to oppose her parole. In a recent interview, he expressed his belief that despite forgiving her, she still deserves to remain behind bars for the rest of her life. Parole is granted in South Carolina only about 8% of the time, and for Smith, who remains a figure of public outrage, the odds are particularly slim. Pope, who is now the Republican Speaker pro tem of the South Carolina House, intends to remind the parole board that the jury believed life meant life. He anticipates that Smith will attempt to evoke sympathy, as she has rehearsed for decades, but remains steadfast in his commitment to ensure justice for the victims. The hearing, conducted virtually, will determine whether Susan Smith can be released or continue serving the life sentence for a crime that left a lasting mark on the nation's conscience.